Section 22 of the Book of Household Management. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Katie Gibney. The Book of Household Management by Isabella Beeton. Recipes, Chapter 10, Part 3. Pickled gherkins. Ingredients: salt and water, 1 ounce of bruised ginger, 1/2 ounce of whole black pepper, 1/4 ounce of whole allspice, 4 cloves, 2 blades of mace, a little horseradish. This proportion of pepper, spices, etc., for 1 quart of vinegar. Mode: let the gherkins remain in salt and water for 3 or 4 days. When take them out, wipe perfectly dry, and put them into a stone jar. Boil sufficient vinegar to cover them, with spices and pepper, etc., in the above proportion, for 10 minutes. Pour it, quite boiling, over the gherkins. Cover the jar with vine leaves, and put over them a plate, setting them near the fire, where they must remain all night. Next day drain off the vinegar, boil it up again, and pour it hot over them. Cover up with fresh leaves, and let the whole remain till quite cold. Now tie down closely with bladder to exclude the air, and in a month or 2 they will be fit for use. Time, 4 days. Seasonable from the middle of July to the end of August. Gherkins. Gherkins are young cucumbers, and the only way in which they are used for cooking purposes is pickling them, as by the recipe here given. Not having arrived at maturity, they have not, of course, so strongly a developed flavor as cucumbers, and as a pickle they are very general favorites. Gooseberry sauce for boiled mackerel. Ingredients: 1 pint of green gooseberries, 3 tablespoonfuls of béchamel, No. 367 (veal gravy may be substituted for this), 2 ounces of fresh butter, seasoning to taste of salt, pepper, and grated nutmeg. Mode: boil the gooseberries in water until quite tender, strain them, and rub them through a sieve. Put into a saucepan the béchamel or gravy, with the butter and seasoning, add the pulp from the gooseberries, mix all well together, and heat gradually through. A little pounded sugar added to this sauce is by many persons considered an improvement, as the saccharine matter takes off the extreme acidity of the unripe fruit. Time. Boil the gooseberries from 20 minutes to 1/2 hour. Sufficient, this quantity, for a large dish of mackerel. Seasonable from May to July. The gooseberry. This useful and wholesome fruit, Ribes gossularia, is thought to be indigenous to the British Isles, and may be occasionally found in a wild state in some of the eastern counties, although, when uncultivated, it is but a very small and inferior berry. The high state of perfection to which it has been here brought is due to the skill of the British gardeners, for in no other country does it attain the same size and flavor. The humidity of the British climate, however, has doubtless something to do with the result, and it is said that gooseberries produced in Scotland, as far north as Inverness, are of a very superior character. Malic and citric acid, blended with sugar, produce the pleasant flavor of the gooseberry, and upon the proper development of these properties depends the success of all cooking operations with which they are connected. Glaze for covering cold hams, tongues, etc. Ingredients: stock No. 104 or 107, doubling the quantity of meat in each. Mode: we may remark at the outset that unless glaze is wanted in very large quantities, it is seldom made expressly. Either of the stocks mentioned above, boiled down and reduced very considerably, will be found to produce a very good glaze. Put the stock into a stewpan, over a nice clear fire; let it boil till it becomes somewhat stiff, when keep stirring, to prevent its burning. The moment it is sufficiently reduced, and comes to a glaze, turn it out into the glaze pot, of which we have here given an engraving. As, however, this is not to be found in every establishment, a white earthenware jar would answer the purpose. and this may be placed in a vessel of boiling water to melt the glaze when required. It should never be warmed in a saucepan, except on the principle of the bain marie, lest it should reduce too much, and become black and bitter. If the glaze is wanted of a pale colour, more veal than beef should be used in making the stock, and it is as well to omit turnips and celery, as these impart a disagreeable bitter flavour. To glaze cold joints, &c. Melt the glaze by placing the vessel which contains it into the bain marie or saucepan of boiling water. Brush it over the meat with a paste brush, and if in places it is not quite covered, repeat the operation. The glaze should not be too dark a colour. See Coloured cut of glazed ham. Glaze kettle. This is a kettle used for keeping the strong stock boiled down to a jelly, which is known by the name of glaze. It is composed of 2 tin vessels, as shown in the cut, one of which, the upper, containing the glaze, is inserted into one of larger diameter and containing boiling water. A brush is put in the small hole at the top of the lid, and is employed for putting the glaze on anything that may require it. The bain marie. So long as the time when emperors ruled in Rome, and the yellow Tiber passed through a populous and wealthy city, this utensil was extensively employed, and it is frequently mentioned by that profound culinary chemist of the ancients, Apicius. It is an open kind of vessel, as shown in the engraving and explained in our paragraph No. 87, on the French terms used in modern cookery, filled with boiling or nearly boiling water, and into this water should be put all the stewpans containing those ingredients which it is desired to keep hot. The quantity and quality of the contents of these vessels are not at all affected, and if the hour of dinner is uncertain in any establishment, by reason of the nature of the master's business, nothing is so certain a means of preserving the flavour of all dishes as the employment of the bain marie. Green sauce for green geese or ducklings. INGREDIENTS. 1/4 pint of sorrel juice, 1 glass of sherry, 1/2 pint of green gooseberries, 1 teaspoonful of pounded sugar, 1 oz. of fresh butter. Mode. Boil the gooseberries in water until they are quite tender, mash them and press them through a sieve, put the pulp into a saucepan with the above ingredients, simmer for 3 or 4 minutes, and serve very hot. Time. 3 or 4 minutes. Note. We have given this recipe as a sauce for green geese, thinking that some of our readers might sometimes require it, but at the generality of fashionable tables, it is now seldom or never served. Sorrel. We gather from the pages of Pliny and Apicius that sorrel was cultivated by the Romans in order to give it more strength and flavour, and that they also partook of it sometimes stewed with mustard, being seasoned with a little oil and vinegar. At the present day, English cookery is not much indebted to this plant, Rumix acetosa, although the French make use of it to a considerable extent. It is found in most parts of Great Britain, and also on the continent, growing wild in the grass meadows, and, in a few gardens, it is cultivated. The acid of sorrel is very prononcé, and is what chemists term a binoxalate of potash, that is, a combination of oxalic acid with potash. General stock for gravies. Either of the stocks, Nos. 104, 105, or 107, will be found to answer very well for the basis of many gravies, unless these are wanted very rich indeed. By the addition of various store sauces, thickening and flavouring, the stocks here referred to may be converted into very good gravies. It should be borne in mind, however, that the goodness and strength of spices, wines, flavourings, &c., evaporate, and that they lose a great deal of their fragrance, if added to the gravy a long time before they are wanted. If this point is attended to, a saving of 1/2 the quantity of these ingredients will be effected, as, with long boiling, the flavour almost entirely passes away. The shank bones of mutton, previously well soaked, will be found a great assistance in enriching gravies. A kidney or melt, beef skirt, trimmings of meat, etc., etc., answer very well when only a small quantity is wanted; and, as we have before observed, a good gravy need not necessarily be so very expensive, for economically prepared dishes are oftentimes found as savoury and wholesome as dearer ones. The cook should also remember that the fragrance of gravies should not be overpowered by too much spice, or any strong essences, and that they should always be warmed in a bain marie after they are flavoured, or else in a jar or jug placed in a saucepan full of boiling water. The remains of roast meat gravy should always be saved, as, when no meat is at hand, a very nice gravy in haste may be made from it, and when added to hashes, ragouts, &c., is a great improvement. GRAVY KETTLE. This is a utensil which will not be found in every kitchen, but it is a useful one where it is necessary to keep gravies hot for the purpose of pouring over various dishes as they are cooking. It is made of copper, and should, consequently, be heated over the hot plate, if there be one, or a charcoal stove. The price at which it can be purchased is set down by Messrs. Slack at 14s. GRAVY FOR ROAST MEAT. 1. INGREDIENTS. Gravy, salt. Mode. Put a common dish with a small quantity of salt in it under the meat, about 1/4 hour before it is removed from the fire. When the dish is full, take it away, baste the meat, and pour the gravy into the dish on which the joint is to be served. Sauces and gravies in the Middle Ages. Neither poultry, butcher's meat, nor roast game were eaten dry in the Middle Ages, any more than fried fish is now. Different sauces, each having its own peculiar flavour, were served with all these dishes, and even with the various parts of each animal. Strange and grotesque sauces, as, for example, eggs cooked on the spit, butter fried and roasted, were invented by the cooks of those days, but these preparations had hardly any other merit than that of being surprising and difficult to make. A quickly made gravy. 1. INGREDIENTS. 1/2 lb. of shin of beef, 1/2 onion, 1/4 carrot, 2 or 3 sprigs of parsley and savoury herbs, a piece of butter about the size of a walnut, cayenne and mace to taste, 3/4 pint of water. Mode. Cut up the meat into very small pieces, slice the onion and carrot, and put them into a small saucepan with the butter. Keep stirring over a sharp fire until they have taken a little colour, when add the water and the remaining ingredients. Simmer for 1/2 hour, skim well, strain, and flavour, when it will be ready for use. Time. 1/2 hour. Average cost, for this quantity, 5d. 100 different dishes. Modern housewives know pretty well how much care and attention and foresight are necessary in order to serve well a little dinner for 6 or 8 persons, a dinner which will give credit to the ménage, and satisfaction and pleasure to the guests. A quickly made gravy, under some circumstances that we have known occur, will be useful to many housekeepers when they have not much time for preparation. But, talking of speed and time and preparation, what a combination of all these must have been necessary for the feast at the wedding of Charles VI. of France. On that occasion, as Froissart, the chronicler, tells us, the art of cooking, with its innumerable paraphernalia of sauces, with gravy, pepper, cinnamon, garlic, scallion, brains, gravy soups, milk pottage, and ragouts, had a signal triumph. The skilful chef de cuisine of the royal household covered the great marble table of the regal palace with no less than 100 different dishes, prepared in 100 different ways. A good beef gravy for poultry, game, etc. Ingredients. 1/2 lb. of lean beef, 1/2 pint of cold water, 1 shallot or small onion, 1/2 a teaspoonful of salt, a little pepper, 1 tablespoonful of Harvey's sauce or mushroom ketchup, 1/2 a teaspoonful of arrowroot. Mode. Cut up the beef into small pieces, and put it, with the water, into a stewpan. Add the shallot and seasoning, and simmer gently for 3 hours, taking care that it does not boil fast. A short time before it is required, take the arrowroot, and having mixed it with a little cold water, Pour it into the gravy, which keep stirring, adding the Harvey's sauce, and just letting it boil. Strain off the gravy in a tureen, and serve very hot. Time. 3 hours. Average cost, 8d. per pint. BROWN GRAVY. 1. INGREDIENTS. 2 oz. of butter, 2 large onions, 2 lbs. of shin of beef, 2 small slices of lean bacon, if at hand, salt and whole pepper to taste, 3 cloves, 2 quarts of water. For thickening, 2 oz. of butter, 3 oz. of flour. Mode. Put the butter into a stewpan, set this on the fire, throw in the onions cut in rings, and fry them a light brown. Then add the beef and bacon, which should be cut into small square pieces, season, and pour in a teacupful of water. Let it boil for about 10 minutes, or until it is of a nice brown colour, occasionally stirring the contents. Now fill up with water in the above proportion, let it boil up, when draw it to the side of the fire to simmer very gently for 1 1/2 hours. Strain, and when cold, take off all the fat. In thickening this gravy, melt 3 oz. of butter in a stewpan, add 2 oz. of flour, and stir till of a light brown colour. When cold, add it to the strained gravy, and boil it up quickly. This thickening may be made in larger quantities, and kept in a stone jar for use when wanted. Time. Altogether 2 hours. Average cost, 4d. per pint. CLOVES. This very agreeable spice is the unexpanded flower buds of the Caryophyllus aromaticus, a handsome branching tree, a native of the Malacca Islands. They take their name from the Latin word clavus, or the French clou, both meaning a nail, and to which the clove has a considerable resemblance. Cloves were but little known to the ancients, and Pliny appears to be the only writer who mentions them, and he says, vaguely enough, that some were brought to Rome, very similar to grains of pepper, but somewhat longer; that they were only to be found in India, in a wood consecrated to the gods, and that they served in the manufacture of perfumes. The Dutch, as in the case of the nutmeg, c. 378, endeavoured, when they gained possession of the Spice Islands, to secure a monopoly of cloves, and, so that the cultivation of the tree might be confined to Amboyna, their chief island, bribed the surrounding chiefs to cut down all the trees found elsewhere. The Amboyna, or royal clove, is said to be the best, and is rare, but other kinds, nearly equally good, are produced in other parts of the world, and they come to Europe from Mauritius, Bourbon, Cayenne, and Martinique, as also from St. Kitts, St. Vincent's, and Trinidad. The clove contains about 20% of volatile aromatic oil, to which it owes its peculiar pungent flavour, its other parts being composed of woody fibre, water, gum, and resin. BROWN GRAVY without meat. INGREDIENTS. 2 large onions, 1 large carrot, 2 oz. of butter, 3 pints of boiling water, 1 bunch of savoury herbs, a wineglassful of good beer, salt and pepper to taste. Mode. Slice, flour, and fry the onions and carrots in the butter until of a nice light brown colour; then add the boiling water and the remaining ingredients. Let the whole stew gently for about an hour, then strain, and when cold, skim off all the fat. Thicken it in the same manner as recipe No. 436, and, if thought necessary, add a few drops of colouring No. 108. Time. 1 hour. Average cost, 2d. per pint. Note. The addition of a small quantity of mushroom ketchup or Harvey's sauce very much improves the flavour of this gravy. Rich gravy for hashes, ragouts, &c. INGREDIENTS. 2 lbs. of shin of beef, 1 large onion or a few shallots, a little flour, a bunch of savoury herbs, 2 blades of mace, 2 or 3 cloves, 4 whole allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of whole pepper, 1 slice of lean ham or bacon, 1/2 a head of celery, when at hand, 2 pints of boiling water, salt and cayenne to taste. Mode. Cut the beef into thin slices, as also the onions, dredge them with flour, and fry of a pale brown, but do not allow them to get black. Pour in the boiling water, let it boil up, and skim. Add the remaining ingredients, and simmer the whole very gently for 2 hours, or until all the juices are extracted from the meat. Put it by to get cold, when take off all the fat. This gravy may be flavoured with ketchup, store sauces, wine, or, in fact, anything that may give additional and suitable relish to the dish it is intended for. Time. Rather more than 2 hours. Average cost, 8d. per pint. Allspice. This is the popular name given to pimento, or Jamaica pepper, known to naturalists as Eugenia pimenta, and belonging to the order of Myrtaceae. It is the berry of a fine tree in the West Indies and South America, which attains a height of from 15 to 20 feet. The berries are not allowed to ripen, but, being gathered green, are then dried in the sun, and then become black. It is an inexpensive spice, and is considered more mild and innocent than most other spices. Consequently, it is much used for domestic purposes, combining a very agreeable variety of flavours. Gravy made without meat for fowls. INGREDIENTS. The necks, feet, livers, and gizzards of the fowls, 1 slice of toasted bread, 1/2 onion, 1 faggot of savoury herbs, salt and pepper to taste, 1/2 pint of water, thickening of butter and flour, 1 dessertspoonful of ketchup. Mode. Wash the feet of the fowls thoroughly clean, and cut them and the neck into small pieces. Put these into a stewpan with the bread, onions, herbs, seasoning, livers, and gizzards. Pour the water over them, and simmer gently for 1 hour. Now take out the liver, pound it, and strain the liquor to it. Add a thickening of butter and flour, and a flavouring of mushroom ketchup. Boil it up and serve. Time. 1 hour. Average cost, 4d. per pint. A cheap gravy for hashes, &c. INGREDIENTS. Bones and trimmings of the cooked joint intended for hashing, 1/4 teaspoonful of salt, 1/4 teaspoonful of whole pepper, 1/4 teaspoonful of whole allspice, a small faggot of savoury herbs, 1/2 head of celery, 1 onion, 1 oz. of butter, thickening, sufficient boiling water to cover the bones. Mode. Chop the bones in small pieces, and put them in a stewpan, with the trimmings, salt, pepper, spice, herbs, and celery. Cover with boiling water, and let the whole simmer gently for 1 1/2 or 2 hours. Slice and fry the onion in the butter till it is of a pale brown, and mix it gradually with the gravy made from the bones. Boil for 1/4 hour, and strain into a basin. Now put it back into the stewpan, flavour with walnut pickle or ketchup, pickled onion liquor, or any store sauce that may be preferred. Thicken with a little butter and flour, kneaded together on a plate, and the gravy will be ready for use. After the thickening is added, the gravy should just boil, to take off the rawness of the flour. Time. 2 hours, or rather more. Average cost, 4d., exclusive of the bones and trimmings. Jugged gravy. Excellent. INGREDIENTS. 2 lbs. of shin of beef, 1/4 lb. of lean ham, 1 onion or a few shallots, 2 pints of water, salt and whole pepper to taste, 1 blade of mace, a faggot of savoury herbs, 1/2 a large carrot, 1/2 a head of celery. Mode. Cut up the beef and ham into small pieces, and slice the vegetables. Take a jar, capable of holding 2 pints of water, and arrange therein, in layers, the ham, meat, vegetables, and seasoning, alternately, filling up with the above quantity of water. Tie down the jar, or put a plate over the top, so that the steam may not escape. Place it in the oven, and let it remain there from 6 to 8 hours. Should, however, the oven be very hot, less time will be required. When sufficiently cooked, strain the gravy, and when cold, remove the fat. It may be flavoured with ketchup, wines, or any other store sauce that may be preferred. It is a good plan to put the jar in a cool oven overnight, to draw the gravy, and then it will not require so long baking the following day. Time. From 6 to 8 hours, according to the oven. Average cost, 7d. per pint. Celery. As in the above recipe, the roots of celery are principally used in England for flavouring soups, sauces, and gravies, and for serving with cheese at the termination of a dinner, and as an ingredient for salad. In Italy, however, the green leaves and stems are also employed for stews and soups, and the seeds are also more frequently made use of on the continent than in our own islands. In Germany, celery is very highly esteemed, and it is there boiled and served up as a dish by itself, as well as used in the composition of mixed dishes. We ourselves think that this mild aromatic plant might oftener be cooked than it is, for there are very few nicer vegetable preparations brought to table than a well dressed plate of stewed celery. VEAL GRAVY for white sauces, fricassees, &c. INGREDIENTS. 2 slices of nicely flavoured lean ham, any poultry trimmings, 3 lbs of lean veal, a faggot of savoury herbs, including parsley, a few green onions, or 1 large onion may be substituted for these, a few mushrooms, when obtainable, 1 blade of mace, salt to taste, 3 pints of water. Mode. Cut up the ham and veal into small square pieces, put these in a stewpan, moistening them with a small quantity of water, place them over the fire to draw down. When the bottom of the stewpan becomes covered with a white glaze, fill up with water in the above proportions, add the remaining ingredients, stew very slowly for 3 or 4 hours, and do not forget to skim well the moment it boils. Put it by, and, when cold, take off all the fat. This may be used for béchamel, sauce tournée, and many other white sauces. Time. 3 or 4 hours. Average cost, 9d. per pint. Cheap gravy for minced veal. INGREDIENTs. Bones and trimmings of cold roast or boiled veal, 1 1/2 pint of water, 1 onion, 1/4 teaspoonful of minced lemon peel, 1/4 teaspoonful of salt, 1 blade of pounded mace, the juice of 1/4 lemon, thickening of butter and flour. Mode. Put all the ingredients into a stewpan, except the thickening and lemon juice, and let them simmer very gently for rather more than 1 hour, or until the liquor is reduced to a pint, when strain through a hair sieve. Add a thickening of butter and flour, and the lemon juice. Set it on the fire, and let it just boil up, when it will be ready for use. It may be flavoured with a little tomato sauce, and, where a rather dark coloured gravy is not objected to, ketchup or Harvey's sauce may be added at pleasure. Time. Rather more than 1 hour. Average cost, 3d. Gravy for venison. INGREDIENTS. Trimmings of venison, 3 or 4 mutton shank bones, salt to taste, 1 pint of water, 2 teaspoonfuls of walnut ketchup. Mode. Brown the trimmings over a nice clear fire, and put them in a stewpan with the shank bones and water. Simmer gently for 2 hours, strain and skim, and add the walnut ketchup and a seasoning of salt. Let it just boil, when it is ready to serve. Time. 2 hours. Venison. Far, far away in ages past, our fathers loved to chase, and what it brought; and it is usually imagined that when Isaac ordered his son Esau to go out with his weapons, his quiver and his bow, and to prepare for him savoury meat, such as he loved, that it was venison he desired. The wise Solomon, too, delighted in this kind of fare, for we learn that, at his table, every day were served the wild ox, the roebuck, and the stag. Xenophon informs us, in his history, that Cyrus, king of Persia, ordered that venison should never be wanting at his repasts, and of the effeminate Greeks it was the delight. The Romans also were devoted admirers of the flesh of the deer, and our own kings and princes, from the great Alfred down to the prince consort, have hunted, although it must be confessed, under vastly different circumstances, the swift buck, and relished their haunch all the more keenly, that they had borne themselves bravely in the pursuit of the animal. To dry herbs for winter use. On a very dry day, gather the herbs, just before they begin to flower. If this is done when the weather is damp, the herbs will not be so good a colour. It is very necessary to be particular in little matters like this, for trifles constitute perfection, and herbs nicely dried will be found very acceptable when frost and snow are on the ground. It is hardly necessary, however, to state that the flavour and fragrance of fresh herbs are incomparably finer. They should be perfectly freed from dirt and dust, and be divided into small bunches, with their roots cut off. Dry them quickly in a very hot oven, or before the fire, as by this means most of their flavour will be preserved, and be careful not to burn them. Tie them up in paper bags, and keep in a dry place. This is a very general way of preserving dried herbs, but we would recommend the plan described in a former recipe. Seasonable. From the month of July to the end of September is the proper time for storing herbs for winter use. Herb powder for flavouring, when fresh herbs are not obtainable. INGREDIENTS. 1 oz. of dried lemon thyme, 1 oz. of dried winter savory, 1 oz. of dried sweet marjoram and basil, 2 oz. of dried parsley, 1 oz. of dried lemon peel. Mode. Prepare and dry the herbs by recipe No. 445. Pick the leaves from the stalks, pound them, and sift them through a hair sieve. Mix in the above proportions, and keep in glass bottles, carefully excluding the air. This, we think, a far better method of keeping herbs, as the flavour and fragrance do not evaporate so much as when they are merely put in paper bags. Preparing them in this way, you have them ready for use at a moment's notice. Mint, sage, parsley, etc., dried, pounded, and each put into separate bottles, will be found very useful in winter. Corks with wooden tops. These are the best corks to use when it is indispensable that the air should not be admitted to the ingredients contained in bottles which are in constant use. The top, which, as will be seen by the accompanying little cut, is larger than the cork, is made of wood, and, besides effectually covering the whole top of the bottle, can be easily removed and again used, as no corkscrew is necessary to pull it out. Savory. This we find described by Columella, a voluminous Roman writer on agriculture, as an odoriferous herb, which, in the brave days of old, entered into the seasoning of nearly every dish. Verily, there are but few new things under the sun, and we don't find that we have made many discoveries in gastronomy, at least beyond what was known to the ancient inhabitants of Italy. We possess 2 varieties of this aromatic herb, known to naturalists as satyriga. They are called summer and winter savory, according to the time of the year when they are fit for gathering. Both sorts are in general cultivation throughout England. Horseradish sauce, to serve with roast beef. INGREDIENTS. 4 tablespoonfuls of grated horseradish, 1 teaspoonful of pounded sugar, 1 teaspoonful of salt, 1/2 teaspoonful of pepper, 2 teaspoonfuls of made mustard, vinegar. Mode. Grate the horseradish, and mix it well with the sugar, salt, pepper, and mustard. Moisten it with sufficient vinegar to give it the consistency of cream, and serve in a tureen. 3 or 4 tablespoonfuls of cream, added to the above, very much improve the appearance and flavour of this sauce. To heat it to serve with hot roast beef, put it in a bain-marie or a jar, which place in a saucepan of boiling water. Make it hot, but do not allow it to boil, or it will curdle. Note. This sauce is a great improvement on the old-fashioned way of serving cold scraped horseradish with hot roast beef. The mixing of the cold vinegar with the warm gravy cools and spoils everything on the plate. Of course, with cold meat, the sauce should be served cold. The horseradish. This has been, for many years, a favourite accompaniment of roast beef, and is a native of England. It grows wild in wet ground, but has long been cultivated in the garden, and is, occasionally, used in winter salads and in sauces. On account of the great volatility of its oil, it should never be preserved by drying, but should be kept moist by being buried in sand. So rapidly does its volatile oil evaporate, that even when scraped for the table it almost immediately spoils by exposure to the air. Horseradish vinegar. INGREDIENTS. 1/4 lb. of scraped horseradish, 1 oz. of minced shallot, 1 drachm of cayenne, 1 quart of vinegar. Mode. Put all the ingredients into a bottle, which shake well every day for a fortnight. When it is thoroughly steeped, strain and bottle, and it will be fit for use immediately. This will be found an agreeable relish to cold beef, &c. Seasonable. This vinegar should be made either in October or November, as horseradish is then in its highest perfection. Indian curry powder, founded on Dr. Kitchener's recipe. INGREDIENTS. 1/4 lb. of coriander seed, 1/4 lb. of turmeric, 2 oz. of cinnamon seed, 1/2 oz. of cayenne, 1 oz. of mustard, 1 oz. of ground ginger, 1/2 oz. of allspice, 2 oz. of fenugreek seed. Mode. Put all the ingredients in a cool oven, where they should remain one night; then pound them in a mortar, rub them through a sieve, and mix thoroughly together. Keep the powder in a bottle, from which the air should be completely excluded. Note. We have given this recipe for curry powder, as some persons prefer to make it at home; but that purchased at any respectable shop is, generally speaking, far superior, and, taking all things into consideration, very frequently more economical. Indian mustard, an excellent relish to bread and butter, or any cold meat. INGREDIENTS. 1/4 lb. of the best mustard, 1/4 lb. of flour, 1/2 oz. of salt, 4 shallots, 4 tablespoonfuls of vinegar, 4 tablespoonfuls of ketchup, 1/4 bottle of anchovy sauce. Mode. Put the mustard, flour, and salt into a basin, and make them into a stiff paste with boiling water. Boil the shallots with the vinegar, ketchup, and anchovy sauce for 10 minutes, and pour the whole, boiling, over the mixture in the basin. Stir well, and reduce it to a proper thickness. Put it into a bottle, with a bruised shallot at the bottom, and store away for use. This makes an excellent relish, and if properly prepared, will keep for years. Mustard. Before the year 1729, mustard was not known at English tables. About that time an old woman, of the name of Clements, residing in Durham, began to grind the seed in a mill, and to pass the flour through several processes necessary to free the seed from its husks. She kept her secret for many years to herself, during which she sold large quantities of mustard throughout the country, but especially in London. Here it was introduced to the royal table, when it received the approval of George I. From the circumstances of Mrs. Clements being a resident at Durham, it obtained the name of Durham mustard. In the county of that name it is still principally cultivated, and the plant is remarkable for the rapidity of its growth. It is the best stimulant employed to impart strength to the digestive organs, and even in its previously coarsely pounded state, had a high reputation with our ancestors. Indian pickle, very superior. INGREDIENTS. To each gallon of vinegar allow 6 cloves of garlic, 12 shallots, 2 sticks of sliced horseradish, 1/4 lb. of bruised ginger, 2 oz. of whole black pepper, 1 oz. of long pepper, 1 oz. of allspice, 12 cloves, 1/4 oz. of cayenne, 2 oz. of mustard seed, 1/4 lb. of mustard, 1 oz. of turmeric, a white cabbage, cauliflowers, radish pods, French beans, gherkins, small round pickling onions, nasturtiums, capsicums, chilies, etc. Mode. Cut the cabbage, which must be hard and white, into slices, and the cauliflowers into small branches. Sprinkle salt over them in a large dish, and let them remain 2 days. Then dry them, and put them into a very large jar, with garlic, shallots, horseradish, ginger, pepper, allspice, and cloves, in the above proportions. Boil sufficient vinegar to cover them, which pour over, and, when cold, cover up to keep them free from dust. As the other things for the pickle ripen at different times, they may be added as they are ready. These will be radish pods, French beans, gherkins, small onions, nasturtiums, capsicums, chili, etc., etc. As these are procured, they must, first of all, be washed in a little cold vinegar, wiped, and then simply added to the other ingredients in the large jar, only taking care that they are covered by the vinegar. If more vinegar should be wanted to add to the pickle, do not omit first to boil it before adding it to the rest. When you have collected all the things you require, turn all out in a large pan, and thoroughly mix them. Now put the mixed vegetables into smaller jars without any of the vinegar; then boil the vinegar again, adding as much more as will be required to fill the different jars, and also cayenne, mustard seed, turmeric, and mustard, which must be well mixed with a little cold vinegar, allowing the quantities named above to each gallon of vinegar. Pour the vinegar, boiling hot, over the pickle, and when cold, tie down with a bladder. If the pickle is wanted for immediate use, the vinegar should be boiled twice more, but the better way is to make it during one season for use during the next. It will keep for years, if care is taken that the vegetables are quite covered by the vinegar. This recipe was taken from the directions of a lady whose pickle was always pronounced excellent by all who tasted it, and who has, for many years, exactly followed the recipe given above. Note. For small families, perhaps the above quantity of pickle will be considered too large, but this may be decreased at pleasure, taking care to properly proportion the various ingredients. Keeping pickles. Nothing shows more, perhaps, the difference between a tidy, thrifty housewife and a lady to whom these desirable epithets may not honestly be applied, than the appearance of their respective store closets. The former is able, the moment anything is wanted, to put her hand on it at once; no time is lost, no vexation incurred, no dish spoilt for the want of just little something. The latter, on the contrary, hunts all over her cupboard for the ketchup the cook requires, or the pickle the husband thinks he should like a little of with his cold roast beef or mutton chop, and vainly seeks for the Emden groats or arrowroot to make one of her little boys some gruel. One plan, then, we strenuously advise all who do not follow, to begin at once, and that is, to label all their various pickles and store sauces in the same way as the cut here shows. It will occupy a little time at first, but there will be economy of it in the long run. VINEGAR. This term is derived from the two French words vin aigre, sour wine, and should, therefore, be strictly applied to that which is made only from wine. As the acid is the same, however it is procured, that made from ale also takes the same name. Nearly all ancient nations were acquainted with the use of vinegar. We learn in Ruth that the reapers in the East soaked their bread in it to freshen it. The Romans kept large quantity of it in their cellars, using it, to a great extent, in their seasonings and sauces. This people attributed very beneficial qualities to it, as it was supposed to be digestive, antibilious, and antiscorbutic, as well as refreshing. Spartianus, a Latin historian, tells us that, mixed with water, it was the drink of the soldiers, and that, thanks to this beverage, the veterans of the Roman army braved, by its use, the inclemency and variety of all the different seasons and climates of Europe, Asia, and Africa. It is said the Spanish peasantry and other inhabitants of the southern parts of Europe still follow this practice, and add to a gallon of water about a gill of wine vinegar, with a little salt, and that this drink, with a little bread, enables them, under the heat of their burning sun, to sustain the labours of the field. Indian Chutney Sauce. INGREDIENTS. 8 oz. of sharp sour apples, pared and cored, 8 oz. of tomatoes, 8 oz. of salt, 8 oz. of brown sugar, 8 oz. of stoned raisins, 8 oz. of cayenne, 4 oz. of powdered ginger, 2 oz. of garlic, 2 oz. of shallots, 3 quarts of vinegar, 1 quart of lemon juice. Mode. Chop the apples in small square pieces, and add to them the other ingredients. Mix the whole well together, and put it in a well covered jar. Keep this in a warm place, and stir every day for a month, taking care to put on the lid after this operation. Strain, but do not squeeze it dry. Store it away in clean jars or bottles for use, and the liquor will serve as an excellent sauce for meat or fish. Seasonable. Make this sauce when tomatoes are in full season, that is, from the beginning of September to the end of October. Pickles. The ancient Greeks and Romans held their pickles in high estimation. They consisted of flowers, herbs, roots, and vegetables, preserved in vinegar, which were kept for a long time in cylindrical vases with wide mouths. Their cooks prepared pickles with the greatest care, and the various ingredients were macerated in oil, brine, and vinegar, with which they were often impregnated drop by drop. Meat also, after having been cut into very small pieces, was treated in the same manner. Section 23.